million members of this group, and he's the president of it.
Yeah.
And he'd had a 2-year relationship with a male prostitute, and he's doing meth.
Yeah.
And he's got a church of 10,000 people at the time. It's all crumbled now. And I was just like, that's what I was referring to, because my friend and I we knew about that story. In fact, I know Ted Haggard. And let me just say this. He's a very nice man in person. I've gone to lunch with him. I've gone to breakfast with him and his wife, Gail. They really are precious people. Take all the religious stuff out. He was just a very kind, fun person to talk to, honestly. And I'm being genuine here. I'm trying to be super nice. And his story's public. So there's a documentary series on him. And he's also in that documentary called Jesus Camp, which is the freakiest, psychoest, weirdest thing you've ever seen.
I don't think I've seen that one yet.
I've heard
people talk about it.
It's available on YouTube. It's also available on Tubi. Tubi is a free app, Tubi. It's a free, and Jesus Camp is on there, I think, for the next few days. I think it might be on Hulu too. But regardless, dude, it might be too triggering for you, but watch it. But there's a scene in there from one of Ted Haggard's sermons, and he looks in the camera and he says, "I know what you did last night, and I'm going to tell your wife," during one of his sermons. Yeah. And come to find out, this dude is doing a freaking male prostitute. And they met weekly. He had a weekly relationship where he would do meth and they would engage in sexual play.
Hell yeah, dude.
And yet he's preaching against homosexuality.
Yeah.
I don't have words, right? Because, and I'm not saying I was a perfect person. I am not a perfect person. I wasn't a perfect person. But how can I say this and be just, I want to be authentic, but also, humble here. When I was a Christian, I really, really tried to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I really tried to crucify the flesh. I tried to take captive every thought that would exalt itself above the knowledge of God. I really tried to consecrate my heart, think right, do right. I tried to pray and I tithed and you know what I mean? Like, I was really earnestly trying to live this straight and narrow. Like, if I even saw a woman that was attractive, I would divert my eyes and then start praying in tongues. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I really was trying to do it, man. You know what I mean? Like, I really was trying to live that life.
Yeah.
So when I would hear stories like this, I'm just being honest here, Kyle, it pissed me the F off. It pissed me off. I'm like, how? I would go to God and I'm like, God, what the hell is going on? Like, here I am. I'm not sleeping with male prostitutes. I'm not sleeping with even women. I'm not sleeping with any prostitutes. I'm not doing meth. Like, I'm not drinking. I'm not smoking marijuana. Like, I'm doing this deal. Why is my church only 300?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you blessing me? Of course, God doesn't exist. I know why. I know why I wouldn't grow a big church, because I didn't have the gifting, apparently, or there was I was the one holding it back, not God. God wasn't keeping my church from growing. I was. So it was just frustrating to find out about people like, the Hillsong Church, that's a global, worldwide phenomenon. And yet there's pedophilia and sexual abuse and cover up and hiding and secrecy. And even in the own group that I was in, I won't name these people because it's not as out there known, but I personally had friends, like people that I personally knew, had their cell phone number. I was a personal friend of theirs. And I remember them confessing stuff to me that, hey, I was out of town and I met this woman and we messed around and I just had to confess it to somebody, and they were confessing it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, and I'm not doing that, like, as a pastor, like, I'm not doing that. And how is it that they are still, their church is growing? And now it all makes sense to me now. They were just good communicators. They were good. In other words, they could have been doing that in the secular world. You know what I mean? Like, they could have started a business and the business would have gone well. they had certain gifting to manage and to, because church is a business, despite what people want to say, it is a business. And they're just good managers, they're skilled leaders. But that doesn't mean there ain't shenanigans going on behind closed doors. So if there was a God, he's turning a blind eye to that. And until they finally get caught. Now, not everybody gets caught. Not everybody gets caught. Hello, Robbie Zachariah got away with it until he died.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do remember Robbie's. He's an Indian guy, right?
Yes. Yeah. He had a real cool accent.
Yep, I remember him. I liked him.
Me too.
I thought he was really cool. I didn't know that he died or that he had any sort of scandal after he died. But yeah, that is wild. But it happens a lot. It's an old story.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that the Zen didn't help me stay on track. I know we're of course we're doing what I want to do, which is shoot the crap about our experience in the evangelical church. So we're getting close to the holidays. Do you do any kind of prep work in your heart and in your soul to be around, Christian family members? Is there anything that you'd like? Okay, I just won't bring that up. I won't talk about that. Or is there any kind of prep work that you have to kind of go through before holidays?
Not for me personally. So like my immediate family, like my mom and stepdad, are more agnostic. I have some members in my extended family that are maybe a little more nominal. I don't really see my CBC friends around the holidays so much because they're off doing stuff with their families.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are things that seem to amp up. I was actually approached 2 days ago while in Walmart, someone asking me to go to their Bible study. So I mean, those things do ramp up, and
because you're in the buckle of the Bible Belt.
I am, yeah. And this guy gave me kind of like Mormon vibes, like he walked up like, "Would you like to go to our church?" But I was polite, I said, "Hey," he asked me if I was a believer. I said, "No." He's like, "Well, would you still be interested in coming?" That's perfectly fine. And I'm like, I was a licensed minister at one point. He said, we prove the Bible, we prove the existence of God through science and the Bible. And I was like, do you? But no, I was polite. And I just said no. And I mean, I think that's the thing for me is like, unless someone's being rude, I remember the mindset that they had. They believe that this world is lost and it's dying, and they're sad by it. They believe that God is saddened by it. And after I told this guy no, like he did look defeated, and I felt for him in that moment. But I think the biggest thing for me is always just setting clear boundaries with people, and especially when it comes to your family. That's a hard thing to navigate, I would imagine. I mean, you've got immediate family. Your parents, from what I understand, are still very Christian. And so, I don't know, because you have to, on some level, associate with them, unless they're just absolutely like abusive. Like you may not feel that pulled in, and you shouldn't. But I think most people during the holidays, they want their kids to see their parents and, or grandkids or, whatever. And so, in some sense, that relationship is a little bit harder to set boundaries with, because if you set those boundaries and then there is some actual fallout, then you may not, have a relationship with your parents. But I think at the end of the day, like bottom line is you just both have to be respectful to each other.
Yeah.
I understand that my Christian friends are going to talk about Christianity, right? That's a given, right?
Yeah.
It's a big part of their life. If I'm hanging out with them, they're going to make comments about it. They're not necessarily directing them at me. That's just how they talk. That's how they normally are. And, if I want to be their friend, I've got to be accepting of that. I've got to be respectful of that. And then, I expect the same on the flip. This is who I am. If we have to be in each other's lives, then that's something that you also need to accept. I'm not just going to be the odd person out. I'm not going to be the one who's, always having to preface his beliefs or, whatever. I don't want to feel like I'm the, the second class in our friend group kind of thing. And I don't want them to feel that way either. I think they should feel comfortable just being who they are. But yeah, I think to me, respect is the big thing. You love me, you care about me, you need to show it. If you're acting like an asshole, you're not showing it. And
Yeah.
in that case, I'm going to go. I'm not, I may have a conversation with you about it. Maybe I have several conversations with you about it if you're somebody who's really important to me. But at the end of the day, like, I don't have time for people who, don't really care. They just care about their own opinion. And
Yeah. I saw a podcast the other day. It was really fascinating. I wish I could think of the guy's name, and I would share it. Maybe I'll look it up here in a second and share it, because it was such a good YouTube channel. And he does a response video, and so he was responding to this Christian that said that same thing. He said, "I'm going to prove God's existence using
science in the Bible."
Science in the Bible." And I remember thinking, even the response video, the guy goes, "Oh, this is going to be good."
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, yeah, I'm very curious, like, because there's literally zero evidence.
Yeah.
But what it is, it's that God of the gaps mentality. It's the things we can't explain. And basically what this guy said, this Christian said, look around, and the world itself, the earth itself, shows the glory of the Lord. And I remember thinking, it does? I don't, like, there's so many things that I'm like, what evidence are you I don't even understand the evidence that you're talking about. What you're talking about is things that maybe we can't quite explain yet. That's the evidence. Like, that's the evidence. The lack of our understanding at this point, that's the evidence. And you're like, how is that the evidence of all the other BS that you're trying to say? I'm so lost here.
Yeah.
Because I've often thought this when someone says whatever, they want to say something about that it's true. And I'm like, prove it. Like, give me some proof. Well, in the book of Matthew, like,
not proof. Yeah, no, that's
not proof. Because here's the thing, Kyle, and I think you're the same. I left Christianity because everything points the other way. Everything makes sense to me through evolution. It makes sense to me why we have children that get leukemia. Like, why 98% of all life that has ever been on the planet has gone extinct. And through DNA, we absolutely know with absolute certainty that Adam and Eve weren't the first two humans created 6,000 years ago. That's absolutely 100% proven wrong. And then you get into the Neanderthals, descendant, like, so just please explain this. How is this? So God creates two humans, and then they digress. They go back to being kind of like cavemen, and then the others go. What are you trying to say here?
Yeah. I think that for me, it was not only was there no proof of God, there was contradictory proof. For the Bible, there's proof that contradicts what the Bible says.
Right.
And so that's still where I'm at, unless you can kind of get rid of not only the facts that we have that contradict the Bible, both in its own history and in its statements about existence. But then also you have to then supply proof for the existence of your God, because even if the Bible was 100% like historically accurate, in terms of, there was this great nation of Israel, and they had all these kings, and they had these tens of thousands of people, which, again, archaeologically, it sounds like ancient Israel was maybe a nation of a few hundred as opposed to a few thousand, which if you read the Bible, they are going to war with thousands of people in their troops. I think Gideon led like 8,000 or something like that. And you remember he kept whittling them down, and the ones that drank from the river like a dog, he was like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Go. And then he kept the other ones. But I think they've got to supply that proof. And I don't think that they understand what kind of proof people are really looking for. And then also they go in and they talk about a science that is probably I saw this, to be completely fair, I saw this with atheists too, right? They hear one person say something and then it just keeps getting repeated. So like the God delusion, I didn't even have to read. I just knew what it said because I talked to enough atheists. And I think, Christians, they definitely do the same thing. They hear an argument by William Lane Craig and they expect him to know and be knowledgeable about whatever it is that he's arguing about. And then he's not, but then they keep repeating it.
Right.
And so then you hear the same argument over and over again of, some gross misunderstanding about what was either said about, a specific thing. Like the thing I've been hearing lately is scientists no longer believe in natural selection.
Huh.
That was not what was said. Scientists no longer believe that natural selection is it. And there's only a group of scientists. So it's not even the scientific community as a whole. It's just a small portion of the scientific community that thinks that there is another Darwinian function that allows for evolution. But
right.
A Christian heard natural selection's out, evolution's false, science doesn't even agree anymore. And it's like, that's not what was said at all. They still believe in natural selection. They just think something else is happening too.
Yeah.
So
I saw some interview, I think or a clip of an interview that Joe Rogan did with Tucker Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
And the clip was basically all of a sudden Tucker Carlson goes, "Oh, evolution. Well, that's been proven false. That's not true." And I was like, "What? It's absolutely true.
Yeah,
that's absolutely true, bro. We have proof for this. We have transitionary species. Like, what are you saying? Like, and otherwise, I don't really know Tucker. Obviously, I don't know Tucker Carlson, but I know of him. And I was just like, how do people get away with saying something absolutely, provably wrong?
Yeah.
Like 100% false. I was talking to someone that I could clearly tell they only watch Fox, right? I could just tell because they were saying things by, Hannity or Tucker. They were saying these things and they said, well, yeah, CNN lies all the time and spreads misinformation. And I was like, and Fox doesn't? Yeah. Like, what are you talking about?
Biased. Yeah.
Oh gosh, dude, have you seen that video clip? If you haven't, bro, you have to YouTube this. Just type in eating the cats and the dogs Trump song. Yeah. There is a video out there that's got, I don't know, like 20 million views and it just released recently. It is the craziest, funniest, catchiest tune you'll ever hear. But because I talked to someone that they think Trump is Jesus Christ. He's the second coming. He's going to save the country and all that stuff. And I'm just like, oh, goodness gracious. This is your representative. Okay. So curious. Anyway. And then that whole dog eating cats and eating dogs, 100% proven conspiracy. Like, yeah, has something a cat or dog. Well, I'm sure. Yeah, that's happened. Like,
it's happened before. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like anything like a real problem. I was just like, oh my gosh, the conspiracy theories, they just flow out of both extreme sides. Both have conspiracy theories. Like I talked to someone that is like, oh, if Harris wins, they're taking all of our guns and they're taking, they're going to take this and do this and and if Trump wins, he's going to he's going to ruin LGBT and you're not going to be able to get married anymore if you're gay. And I'm like, what is happening? Like what? Like both sides are so extreme. Why are you telling me? It's like, you're not telling me why I should vote for you. You're just telling me why I shouldn't vote for the other person. And then you go to the other side and they're doing the exact same thing. And you're like, guys, just talk about what you're going to do and your policies and how you're going to make the world or America better for us that live here, rather than just they're eating the cats and the dogs and they're going to take our guns and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And you're just like,
well, yeah, the political news media is absolutely not a reliable. I mean, MSNBC recently just got called out for editing a Joe Rogan video. He was giving like a shining review to Tulsi Gabbard. And then later in that same interview, he also talked about Kamala.
Yeah.
And they edited it because he wasn't saying great things about Kamala.
Right.
But they edited it to where it sounded like he was saying all the good things he was saying about Tulsi about Kamala. So it made it sound like he was endorsing Kamala, and he wasn't. And the things that they were like, she's not a veteran, but Tulsi is. So he talked about her being a veteran and all these other things, and they edited it. Yeah, it's just it. That's our media. Like they will lie.
Didn't the Joe Rogan camp? Aren't they suing MSNBC?
No. I think he said he wasn't, but people said that he should.
Okay. See, conspiracy. I heard that. Like, oh wow, I guess that's wild.
Yeah. No, that was a rumor, I think, but it was just, they're not honest. They're manipulating information however they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something else I'm curious about now as an atheist. Again, I'll tell you what I think where I'm at, but do you find holidays, how do you approach holidays, especially the holidays coming up, because there's such a Christian theme around the holidays, typically, or at least, I mean, again, from my background, like that's our favorite holiday, right? Christmas, the birth of Christ. How have holidays changed, or have they changed for you? And what's your favorite holiday?
Well, my favorite holiday is Halloween, so that's coming up. That's always been my favorite holiday. I love horror.
I'm glad you said always.
Yeah. Oh no, always. Like since childhood.
Christian, it was Christmas. Now I'm atheist. It's Halloween.
Yeah. No, even as a Christian, and of course, the fact that I watched horror movies as a Christian was not.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh yeah. The Exorcist was one of my favorite movies, which is not
really
CBC approved. So
nor was Harry Potter.
Nor was Harry Potter, and I watched all those too.
Yeah.
And I read some of the books. No, I think because my family was agnostic, like we celebrated Christmas and we, put up a tree, but it was very much like the American just Christmas. We were the people were like, Jesus is the reason for the season, because we didn't really think about Jesus during that season.
Interesting.
So for me, I mean, just kind of going back to that, it's still fun. I'll probably still do Santa. I think those things are fun. I loved that as a child. It was, a very happy time because we'd have these big family get-togethers and trade gifts and, do nice things. And so even when it came to those more religiously affiliated holidays, not much has really changed for me. I mean, Easter, I guess, was more of a minor one. And so, like, I'm not just going to celebrate Easter with my wife. If we have kids, we might hide some eggs and things like that. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only one that's kind of really toned down because there's just not much of a point for us to celebrate it. But
sure. That's right. I forgot that you were agnostic. You didn't give your heart to Christ until 15, 16?
Till I was 15 or 16, around in that year. Started going to youth group because of a cute girl. That was that. So
women there's a powerful magic force there.
There is a powerful magic force.
Well, yeah. So I was raised Christian. So Thanksgiving and Christmas were the two, huge holidays that we celebrated, huge. The biggest,
Yeah.
I have some friends that now that they're atheists, I have some friends that have gone from, Christian to atheist, and now Halloween's their favorite.
Yeah.
Halloween, although my family was religious, they allowed me to dress up.
Really?
They allowed me to dress up for Halloween and go trick-or-treating and all that stuff. We weren't as weird as fundamental as we were and hardcore beliefs. There were definitely some freedoms there, like music. I mean, they always encouraged me to listen to God-focused music, but they didn't really hackle me too much. Now at the church they did. Youth group was hardcore. Don't listen to any kind of devil music for sure. But at home we celebrated Halloween. But for sure, Christmas and Thanksgiving were the biggest. But I'll be honest, my favorite holiday, still Christmas.
Really?
Even as an act, yeah, still Christmas. Obviously, it's not celebrated around now the birth of Jesus, the birth of Christ. It's just, I love everything about Christmas. I love the giving and receiving of gifts. I love the decorations. I love the snow. I love winter. You know what I mean? Like, I just love everything about, I'm going to fix that. See if I can fix that. Man, my light, the changing of the seasons is affecting the light in my recording room. That's interesting. And honestly, that light that's coming through right here across my face, it's not the sun. It's the sun reflecting off a building across the street.
That's awesome.
For real. Yeah, for real. It's literally
Problems of living in the city.
Yeah, very curious. Anyway, so yeah, I love Christmas. And then I love Easter. My children are adults, and I still hid eggs all around our home here for my wife to find.
Yeah.
You know, and she's not religious clearly, but we hid the eggs, and then after she found them all, I put little love notes in them, and some had candy or in there just for me and my wife, and then she hid them for me to find. I mean, we're like children. I'm a child at heart. Yeah, that's funny. I've never really admitted that, but I'm admitting it now. But yeah, you know, so for me, I still love Christmas and Thanksgiving, and still find myself being very thankful. You know, I've said this before publicly. I still say thanks when I have a meal set in front of me. I'm not thanking God. I don't believe in God, but I'm thankful that I have food to eat, because some people don't. You know, so I'm extremely thankful that I have food. I'm extremely thankful that I have a roof over my head. You know, I'm thankful that I have a car. You know what I mean? Like, I have clothes on my back. Clearly, there's no God. So that's, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I have a very thankful heart for some reason. Maybe it stems from my religious upbringing. I don't know, but I can tell you for absolute certain that I don't believe in God. So there's not a thankfulness to God for that, but just a thankfulness in general. Do you find are you still thankful, or?
You know, I never really prayed before meals, even as a Christian, which was kind of like the big no-no. Yeah, I did it occasionally, and if we were out with people, a lot of my Christian friends did, but that was really just never a ritual I got into. I'd always pray before I went to bed, and then, you know, pray at different times throughout the day, but I usually didn't pray before eating. I think that was more of a Christian cultural thing, and since I didn't grow up in the culture so much, I kind of came to it later. Okay. It wasn't something that was as hammered into me. But, you know, I think showing gratitude is definitely a good thing, and feeling grateful. I think for me, most of my, I guess you could say, pseudo-spiritual moments, I do kind of go out in nature. Maybe this is why, you know, Christians are like, look around and you can see God, because there is something spiritual about that, you know, but not in the literal sense, you know, more in the, I think, emotional, psychological. You know, they're going out, if we have a nature trail, and just being out in the woods and hearing the animals and seeing, you know, all the wildlife, and, you know, just realizing that I am a part of something that is much bigger, you know, life on this planet, or looking up into the, you know, the sky. You know, I think those are all humbling experiences that kind of diminish, you know, me in a way that is positive, right? That I don't get so hung up in my own stuff, that, you know, I see that there is something so much bigger than me, and that, you know, there is still this transcendent experience of, you know, the universe is massive, but then also my family, my kids, you know, there are things that go beyond me that I interact with all the time. And I think that that is something that is inherently, you know, spiritual in nature, but just not in a literal metaphysical way.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something else. Go ahead.
That's what my spiritual manifestation today looks like, I guess you could say, is just being in those moments where I can be mindful, meditate, and just feel connected to something bigger than myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's me too. You know, I used to say I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I really don't say that anymore because I think what to me, I just don't feel just like you know, you call yourself an atheist.
Mhm.
For me, I feel disingenuous or dishonest to say I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, because that still leaves a lot of room for, you know, you could actually say I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual and still be a church going Jesus follower.
Yeah, a lot of Christians say that.
Yeah,
Say
a lot of Christians say
exactly.
that now. Yeah, it's kind of trendy. And
Yeah.
so I used to say that in the beginning of my deconstruction process, you know, I found it very difficult. I remember almost the day I came out and said, I am not a Christian. Dude, that was hard. Like that took me a while to get there. In fact, when you and I first met, I couldn't call myself an atheist.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I just did a video about this. I said, I think the title of the video is I struggle to call myself an atheist, or I'm scared to call myself an atheist.
Yeah.
You know, technically I am, but I always say I'm an agnostic atheist as it relates to the Bible God. Yeah, I definitely don't believe in the Bible God. So I'm agnostic in the sense of, is there some supreme being out there somewhere? That I do not know. And you know, technically, and I think we talked about this in our previous podcast. All of us are agnostic, truly. You know, even the Bible thumping Christian, they're actually agnostic because they don't know. They just believe, and that's fine. So it was definitely hard for me to finally come out and say, you know what, I'm agnostic, atheist as it relates to the Bible God. That took me a good stint of time before I finally came out. And it's not something I tell people now. Like I don't meet someone and go, hey, how you doing? My name's Timmy. I'm an agnostic atheist. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just not something that comes up unless it comes up. If it's part of the conversation, I'm not scared to say it now.
Mhm.
Because man, you know, even in the world that I'm in, even here in the Bible Belt, you know, the Midwest, a lot of people, even people who are even churchgoers, I can't tell you how many churchgoers I meet that are like, you know, I'm not really sure I believe all that stuff, but you know, we want to be there at the church for the kids, and you know what I mean? Like it's more what I would call like the cultural Christian, kind of like, you know, Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson. They're not believing in the literal. They're too smart for that. Sorry, everybody. But like they're just too smart to believe in the literal part of it and too knowledgeable to believe in the literal part of it. But they're culturally Christian. They believe in the idea of repentance and sacrifice and a greater power and all that stuff. But I bet if you really, matter of fact, I think Jordan Peterson was put on the spot by Michael Shermer and said, I think Michael Shermer put him on the spot and said, wouldn't let him get out of it. Said, you don't believe that Jesus literally was God and literally was born of a virgin and literally raised from the dead. And he finally nailed him down. He's like, well, no.
Yeah.
It's like, aha, I knew it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the nature of belief and how it relates, like, well, you were talking about your upbringing and, you know, how you just viewed the world in a very different way in terms of how you disseminated information and things like that. And so, you know, I think, especially for people who grew up in the church, because I know a lot of really, I had a professor, and I mean, this guy had a master's degree. He was very intelligent, but he believed the earth was flat, right? He didn't believe in gravity. He thought that the space station was up there because of density. I don't know. His arguments didn't make sense.
Really?
And so I don't know how people I think it's how we take in information and the sources of information we take in that really, and even how we were raised, that really informs how we think about things in a lot of ways. And so, you know, for me, I think that's one thing that at least helps me keep grace for Christians is because in a big way, we are a product of our environment. You know, there's always, well, like if you see poor people and they've been poor for generations, or, you know, African Americans who've had it traditionally very hard in our country. And, there's always that statement of, well, just rise above, choose there. But if that's all you know, then that's all you know.
Right.
And if there are obstacles in your way, then rising above, the moment that you try, you get beat back down, you go to what what you've been doing for generations. And so it's hard to get out of these, I think, cycles of thought. And I think there are a lot of intelligent people in Christianity that are just caught up in the cognitive dissonance of it, or legitimately just cannot think in a different way at their point in their life. Because if the source of information, you saw the interview with Tucker Carlson. He just talks about things that we just know, and we've always known this, and he's pointing to the Bible for, but if that's what you've been taught as the ultimate source of truth, and then people are talking about all of these other things that aren't readily apparent, right? Like, I'm not just going to walk outside and be like, oh, evolution, I'm not going to look up into the sky and be like, oh, I see the Big Bang. These things, they're in books, and they require an understanding of science that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
And so when you just start saying these things, it sounds like nonsense to them because it is so far removed from the way that they've been taught to think their whole life.
Right.
And so I think that's one thing that I try to be mindful of, because switching that gear for a lot of people isn't easy. And, for me, it was probably relatively easy because I didn't grow up in the church. For you, it's pretty amazing that you did it, especially at the age that you did it, because usually after we go into adulthood, our beliefs are largely fixed.
Solidified.
When we're teens, that they can kind of still move around. I don't know that that's something that a lot of people are really able to do. And of course, I don't know the religious background of Russell Brand or Jordan Peterson. So maybe that's why they're a little more fluid with it than some others. Though I think Jordan Peterson now has gone full evangelical Christian now that
has he? Okay.
Aligned with the Daily Wire and stuff like that. But
wow.
Which is crazy to think, because I listened to his whole biblical series while he was a non-believer, and it helped me coming out as an atheist, which he did kind of argue against a little bit, but he made some good points in terms of, things still matter, life still matters, and that was very helpful. So, I think the path to belief and disbelief and how people navigate that a lot of times isn't just your ability to rationalize through things. It's something that's, it's a part of your culture. And, in some ways, when you've been socialized into a certain worldview, it's almost like these are your genetic, predispositions in a way, because of how our brain is socialized.
And I wonder if that's why a lot of the correlation between, and I think this is true. This is just me, what I think I'm seeing, why there's such a correlation between conspiracy theorists and religious people. It's like, it's very curious. It's like interesting that the religious crowd buys into the cabal and all these conspiracy theories. It's like they're, like you said, almost like they're the way their brain works. It just lends to there's secrets and things we don't know, and which is true, but also not true, again, I don't know if you see that, but it just seems like they can be so conspiratorial, and then you find out they're religious and you're like, oh, kind of goes in line with everything that they believe anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Well, it's the challenging of information, and they don't understand and haven't internalized, what makes a thought rational, what makes for good evidence, part of it's confirmation bias. We're all subject to it, but I do have someone I know who is very conspiratorial, and they'll talk about how there's no evidence for, whatever thing that there is actually a little bit of evidence for, but then they'll point to something like that has no evidence. Like, they'll believe things just because someone phrased it in a conspiratorial way. Like, if they can say, hey, the government's doing this because they X, Y, and Z, even if there's no proof of that, they will believe that. But then if you slap, an actual study in their face of human controlled trial, meta-analysis that has thousands of people and is like the gold standard, well, then, that's part of the conspiracy is that, well, that's still just a bullshit study.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that some conspiracies are 100% accurate. There have been those that have been found out. Like, well, I mean, the whole Edward Snowden thing,
right.
People had conspiracies for years that the government was spying on us, and it turns out they were and are. So,
right.
I mean, it's not entirely unfounded. And I guess when you break the public's trust, then that doesn't help. But
right.
I think there still needs to be a standard for information. We can't just go with whatever we think sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Just when it probably doesn't sound that reasonable, but
yeah. I wrote down something when you were saying, I want to bullet point these. So you were talking about prayer. You never really prayed before meals. I'm just going to tell you right now, when I was in Bible college at CBC in Springfield, I worked at a restaurant called El Chico. I remember specifically a pastor and his family came to the restaurant, and I wanted to wait on him. So I told the manager, hey, this is the pastor at the church that I've visited, whatever. I was so offended and judged them when I brought their food out and I watched for them to pray, and they didn't pray. Dude, I was literally, when I say I was offended, I was so offended and judged them and talked bad about them and never went back to that church because he and his family did not pray over the meal, and I thought that was wrong.
That's fun. Absolutely cannot be.
Went to my dorm room and masturbated before I went to bed.
There you go. Yeah. And drink your wine cooler.
That's right. I drank my wine cooler, which is eventually what got me kicked out of that.
Yeah. Well, no, it was because you were gay with your roommate. I thought that.
Oh yeah, I got accused. Yeah, they were pulling it. Yeah, people that don't know. So my roommate was a homosexual. Great guy. He's actually been with the same partner for 30 years. Because my roommate was gay, they asked me, was I sleeping with my girlfriend? Then they asked me if I was gay. And then they, asked me if I drank the wine cooler. So I was just like, what is this? It's like a witch hunt. Like, no, I'm not gay. So how could I sleep? I'm not gay. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in my girlfriend. Of course, I lied about that. They said, did you have sexual relations with your girlfriend? I'm like, nope. I did, of course. Did you drink the
doesn't count.
That's right. The loophole. Butthole loophole. Or what's it called?
Poophole loophole.
Poophole loophole. Oh gosh. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that when we talk about when Christians believe, they look around at the beauty of the earth, and it really is. I'm like you. I'm spiritual in the sense of I'll go out in nature and go hike, and I'll sit on top of a rock and just sit there and listen to the birds and the squirrels and just all the stuff. And it's a very like a spiritual moment, right? Mm-hmm. And people can't imagine how all of this came to be. Therefore, God. Like, therefore, God. Because I can't explain how there's a tree, there's a squirrel, there's this, and that how I'm here, how I'm conscious, therefore, God. And I know that because I used to think that was actually something that I used to say. And I'm sure it's out on YouTube somewhere. I have sermons out there somewhere that I've had no control over those YouTube or lost the password to them. I'd like to get on them and just erase them. But I'm like, well, it's out there. It's actually proof that what I say is my true past. But I remember saying that. I would say, I don't know how people could be atheist and live in this world and look around and just think that this just happened. It just came to be.
Yeah.
Well, obviously I'm not a biologist. I'm not I'm not anything like that. I don't know about all that stuff.
Well, I think that's the problem is, the evidence for it isn't readily available. And if I were to say that, you have little micro changes in your DNA from your parents and that over time, I mean, it is crazy to think about, but when you find more and more evidence that continues to support it, radiometric dating, not specifically carbon dating, because a lot of people think that carbon dating is how they like date dinosaurs.
Oh, Kyle, that carbon dating's been debunked. It's not true.
Yeah.
That's not real. Yeah. I heard that in Bible college.
I heard that too in Bible college. I don't know who debunked it and how. It's math. but okay. It's literally just looking at the decay rate of carbon into another, the half-lives as it decays into another element, and it does that at a fixed rate. You know, it's math. It's not even probably that complicated a math, but I don't know.
I had lunch with a good Christian friend of mine. He's a good dude, like a really, really good dude. And he said something that I didn't even say anything. So people, you'll be very happy with me. I don't try everything I say here and how I make fun and all that. I don't do that in person. This is just part of my channel, what I do. If I meet you in person, I'm not doing this. So he said something, some religious stuff came up, and he knows where I'm at. And I forget how this particular conversation came up, but something came up about the age of the earth. And he said something that I was like, oh, that's right. I used to remember that, believing that, or hearing that, right? There were different things that evangelical Christians, there were different things that they would say. Mm-hmm. And he said one of them, and I had forgotten it. He said, the earth was created old. It was created with the dinosaur bones in it. It was created with the ancient fossils. It was created old.
It's like, why?
Yeah, I was like, so you're telling me, again, I didn't say this to him, but I'm thinking to myself, so God is deceptive? Like,
yeah, he made it old so that we would doubt later.
You know what I'm saying, Kyle? I was just like, what? So now God is not only invisible, he's the invisible imaginary friend that people have, and now he's intentionally being deceptive, and he's trying to make something impossible to believe by deceiving us.
Yeah, why would he do that?
That just
doesn't make sense.
Again, I didn't say any, all I did was I said this, I go, oh, like, okay. You know, like, what am I going to say? You know, I'm not into trying to prove people wrong. I'm not into debates. I'm just not. So I didn't say anything except I just said, oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
I just was like, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That is something I think I remember now saying.
But it doesn't make it, and also, like, there are a lot of beliefs that Christians have that aren't in the Bible. Like, that explanation is not in the Bible. Nowhere does it say that God made the earth old and just put dinosaur bones in there, right? That's not a view that comes from the Bible. So if you're not going to believe a view that comes from the Bible, then why not just believe in evolution instead of making up these alternatives to it that, again, have nothing to do with your belief?
Right.
The Bible is not stated anywhere that the earth was made pre-old and there's bones of animals that never existed in the ground.
Right.
Like, that's silly, right?
Yeah.
Like, he put bones of animals that were never alive in the ground. Why?
Yeah.
Like that
okay. You know, there was another thing that I heard. You know, it's funny. The further I get away from this, the thankfully, in a way, I guess I'm forgetting a lot of those things that I was taught that are just out there. I remember hearing someone talk about the fall of man. The reason we have sickness and disease and death, as you know, is, you know, the Adam and Eve, the fall of man. That everything was created perfect. And then, but it wasn't. Like, if you just use that reasoning and carry it on through, it wasn't created perfect because the serpent. And if God knows everything, he knew that I'm going to create it 98% perfect, but I'm going to put the serpent in there to F it all up.
Yeah.
And I know Adam and Eve are going to eat of the forbidden fruit, which is then going to now make me God, because I can do anything, right? He could have made the punishment many different things. He could have said, okay, Adam, you're going to lose all your hair, you know, whatever. Like, he could have made that any kind of punishment, but no. Cancer, disease, tapeworms, mosquitoes, like allergies, mental illness. All of that is what God did as the punishment for some joker did, however, a millennia ago.
Well, yeah, and that's what always made me kind of think that Genesis was not really meant to be interpreted literally, because it's weird to me that a sovereign God would place the tree, right there where people could get to, right? And then allow the devil, the serpent, whatever, I guess some people don't think that they're necessarily the same, but whatever, into the garden to then tempt Adam and Eve, then curse the serpent and them when he knew that all of that was going to happen, and allowed it, and put things in motion to allow it to happen.
Right.
And so that you're setting us up for failure and then punishing us. Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of other issues with that.
Well, then you get into free will. That the people talk about free will, and I'm like, listen to me. I'm not a freaking brain surgeon here. Absolutely, there will be no free will in heaven. And I know that because there's going to be no sin in heaven. And if you have Christians in heaven, they're going to do the same freaking things they're doing right here now on earth. Like, so if there's not going to be sin in heaven, there's only one way that can happen, is you will not be having any kind of free will.
No, Timmy, it's that you no longer want to sin in heaven. You've now been made perfect, and those sinful desires are gone.
But hey, weren't Adam and Eve created perfect?
They were created good, I guess. I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? It's like when people say, well, in the beginning, God created everything perfect. Just use your brain for a minute and think through this, people. If everything was created in the beginning as perfect, why did Adam and Eve then want to eat of the forbidden fruit? They didn't just want to, they did it. So if you're in heaven and now you're perfect, and you're still going to want to be human. You're still going to want, there's only one way there will be no sin in heaven. And that is if you have no free will.
Yeah.
I mean,
the thing with Adam and Eve is that it wasn't that they weren't sinning before. It was that they didn't know they were sinning before. They became conscious of their sin after. So sin was already present. God just didn't care about it because of ignorance. So when we were no longer ignorant, that was when. But even that's kind of weird, because it's like, why do we have these rules that go against our nature? It's still an odd thing. But
well, I think the worst part, we'll have to bring it to an end. We got about 8 minutes left on this clock. I always thought I wanted to go to heaven as a Christian. That's the end result. That's the thing, that's the prize. I can't wait to see how big my mansion is going to be. I led so many people to Christ, right?
Yeah.
But I remember I heard a sermon one time, and it's even in the Bible somewhere, you probably know where, that there's not going to be any marriage or given in marriage. You can't have sex in heaven. And I'm like, why would I want to live in eternity where I can't have sex? Like, no way. I don't want to go to heaven if I can't be having sex.
Yeah.
What are you? But all you're going to want to do is worship the Lord, Timmy. That's all you're going to want to do is just fall at his feet and worship the Lord
for all eternity.
I don't think that's all I'm going to want to do.
Yeah, if that's all you want to do, then you definitely have been stripped of everything that makes you. Like, maybe you still have free will, but you've been lobotomized by the Lord. So.
A Lord lobotomy.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, dude! Is there anything else that pops into your mind, and when you think about part of your deconstruction story, things that have been helpful? Books. What about books? What books have been helpful to you? Have there been any? I know the Bible was always the most helpful book to you, but what other books have been helpful to you in your deconstruction journey, when you were really starting to ask those questions? Where did you turn?
I really didn't read a lot of books. I mean, I did read some of Jung and Nietzsche, and then some other stuff on like Stoicism. So Seneca, I own some of his writings. But I mean, for me, I've always been more of a fiction guy, so I don't read a lot of nonfiction, unless it is just like straight up like science stuff. If it's the boring, really boring thing, but if it's about animals or dinosaurs, I can lose time to it. Everything else, but like self-help or, sorting through faith, I really didn't have a lot of resources. And I think I've always been a very internal, very meditative type person. And so I think that's helped a lot, is just thinking things through. And then, I had listened to I think the Atheist Experience, which is a podcast, a podcast, and it's also here on YouTube, helped a lot when it came to giving people answers, for sure. I think that is it Matthew Dillahunty? I can't remember his name, but he's the guy who runs it. But he's got a lot of good, responses to Christians.
Yeah.
And he can be a little, aggressive at times.
Yeah. That bald-headed guy? He's the guy.
Bald, yeah.
I like him.
Patience, I don't know if is necessarily his strong suit, but he definitely has a lot of good answers. And so I think he was probably the most helpful, just listening to him and how he responded to some of the questions that he got.
Yeah.
But in terms of sorting myself out emotionally, I think I started doing yoga. I did more meditative things. I would go out in nature. I would just have those times alone to think and to process and to try to redirect my thoughts. And I kind of create sort of, I guess you could say, mantras for myself to repeat over and over again until it really guides the way I think and feel.
Yeah.
And I think that was.
I can totally agree with you there. Of course, I'm as you know, I'm a big reader. I read a lot of fiction. I love fiction. I love novels, murder mysteries and all that kind of stuff. I read a lot. I read almost. I was reading a book a week there for a while. I've kind of tapered off, honestly, because I've been doing videos. I don't have much time to read. But I read at least a book or two a month for sure. I read The God Delusion. I read God Is Not Great. I've done that. And a lot of the YouTube channels have been very, very helpful. That one pastor guy, is it Pastor Brown, or former pastor Dan Brown or something like that? Is that, I'm thinking of Dan Brown now. I'm thinking of Da Vinci Code, I think. But anyway, there's this guy that used to be a pastor. He was an evangelical pastor for years and years. And his was an interesting story because I connected with him. And he's part of the Clergy Project. So he was because he spoke my language. And I think that's what a lot of people connect with me for, because my communication style, and I'm not anti. I do think religion is very poisonous, and I think it's abusive in many ways, certain parts of it. But I'm not of the stand. I don't think that all, religion is evil or bad. That's just me. It's just where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of the bad in there for sure, especially watch Jesus Camp, and that's the group that Kyle and I come out of. It's that very fundamental evangelical group, very toxic, very nutty. I have no qualms at all. I don't feel bad at all saying that is absolutely a delusion, insane delusion. But also have a lot of, I have some Methodist friends that are, they're just really good people, and they really believe certain things that I don't believe, but they're good people, and I can have good conversations with them. But also they're not dogmatic. They believe in evolution, and there's other things which is great. Really, the only people I really have a problem with are those very fundamental evangelical, the Bible is literally true. That's really the group that I just think is complete wingnuts. But other than that, and let me just, I also think there are some good people in that world, just like you. You weren't a creationist, and you were an evangelical, quote unquote, Bible thumper. But you were also open to certain facts.
Yeah.
You weren't denying the facts because God, the Bible says, which I think is beautiful. So anyway, yeah, I think, the thing that really helped me is I had to make that shift. I had to read new books. Some people teeter and they struggle and they find it's unsettling to be in both worlds. For me, as I was moving over, I finally just realized I need to I've been educated for 48 years in this Christian world. I'm gonna switch over here and really educate myself in the secular world, if you will.
Mhm.
And that's what really helped me in my journey. Dude, is that your cat?
Yeah, I've got 3, and we got a new like little bitty kitten that's been wilding out over
Oh,
here.
I love it. Normally my cat will get up here and try to climb up on me. My dog, she's an old Pomeranian. She's 16 years old. She's sleeping over on the couch. Dude, seriously, this was a great conversation. I'm sure this one will do well, just like the other. The other one I think has some 2,000 views. So thanks again for being on the show today, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you big time. Stay
Yeah.
on here and I'll talk to you here in a second.
Okay.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you. Like, subscribe, do all the stuff, cuss and discuss. Like I always say, I do have a Patreon. You can find that. I really, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, the fact that I accidentally stumbled into this and started telling my story and you actually care about it means a lot to me. It really does. Join the community also on Facebook, the Deconstruction Community. Peace, everybody.